I just stumbled upon, across an old computer, a a theory of language I wrote, greatly influenced by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson to a certain extent, especially at the beginning. So it's just noun primitives and time space limitation ontologibles. Noun primitives and time space limitation ontologible source path goal trajectory. We may view non primitives as being a blank slates of representation into which matter form ontologies are thus filled, as if they were, before being conceptualized as a selfhood, merely vacuous arenas of non existence. Verb primitives, on the other hand, would be states of empty time and into the weighted trajectory of which all motion slips her glove. If we enclose a mass of land, water, air, space within each of the four directions, and the amount of time it takes us to bring to an ongoing fruition a continuous study of them as units of form and matter conceptualization, we can then define a word such as mountain, valley, house, river, etc. Only by and through these limitations of time and space, therefore, does the slowly maturing mind process the world before it into expressible language descriptives. As we may, in a way, loan a personhood of ontological study to a myriad of objects whose form matter blank slates constitute our world. If our neurotransmitter networks didn't narrow down tremendously in quantity as they draw closer, I haven't said anything original yet, but I think I will in a minute or so. Draw closer to our visual cortex, allowing us to differentiate the areas of space we see as time gives sense space its course to affect breath. We wouldn't have the ability to categorize and compartmentalize. Uh-oh. Don't tell me the same thing's going to happen. No. Compartmentalize. Ontology, as opposed to its more primitive second cousin of epistemology, is always the student gateway into, through, and onward out of this now primitive definability as we gain a full and certain knowledge of the world around, within, and about us. Ontology is, ever was, and always will be the breather of the two. No, it's the opposite way around, actually. Our true frontiers within the further curvatures of our spiritual science. But the study of being is process of motion also, and we will call the study of being a motion ontology trajectory. It is first and foremost at the womb of all noun primitive definability. It has for its prototype the human concept, uni-multiverse. Now, within this all-encompassing and non-visualizable area of time-space continuum, there exists each individual galaxy of whose massive stars, planets, comets, and whatnot we can stamp with its own persona. Inside our own Milky Way, then there is a solar system, then there is our Earth, where all creatures, including us humans, inhabit. The woman gives homestead to her womb in which the fetus comes to term. Nutrients are passed between mother and child, prototyping, export and import, naval cord navigation. Ontology trajectory is a valid and relevant science, and because in earnest it would accompany ontology as just one area, sister science of sociology and spiritual psychology that might adjunct ontology's earlier eluded discoveries and uncertainties as on a graph or a line of measure. Now, the concepts of time and space as a priori universities are still relevant to today's science, have long been cast by most, at least in partial negation. There are links that they, along with the various vast myriad of other isolated concepts of science, link past and present along a continuous chord therewith. An ontology trajectorist is one who links past with present and finds the naval connection unifying both as if in a seeming eclipse of continuous frozen time. Modern philosophy stands on the shoulders of such as Immanuel Kant and we learn much more. We currently willingly to accept for theories we've long discarded or hold great value. The psychosociologies of ontology trajectories. The link of the early locomotive with that of the latter-day Apollos, the social institutions, they both engendered, along with the reciprocal technologies that interconnect the two, and relevancies of the automotive that by landscape divide the two, even the prototypal metaphor of umbilical cord exchanging nourishment between mother and child, are all students of ontology trajectory. Ontology trajects means originally for a universal and prototypal oversight. First, we define the conceptual, non-primitive, subjective mountain from whose all-inclusive universalism we abstract a singular term, Mount Everest. Ontology trajectory is thus given motion by her localization of time-space limitations. They are among her trajectories and prerogatives. They are also like for like reciprocating of the subject-predicate circularity and metaphorical sentence exchanges, such as the grass is always green on the other side. The predicate could obviously substitute the subject and vice versa. This would seem to us to indicate that ontology as a science has precursored its own origins since science structures first came into being, but as a cemented sentence, ontology trajectory awaits still her basic definition for how as such can the study of being exist without its own motion, evoluting it forward into future timescales. As an adjective, the word other gives eventual as an adjective is as an adjective, the word other gives eventual coinage to not only side but also refers also to place or state of emotional being totally outside the sentence, at least in its literal area of cogently metaphorical representation. Now, because we make use of instruments such as telescopes, microscopes, and all the other various tools, we search ourselves, our world, and the further reaches of the heavens with into ascending non-primitives of time-space limitation, ontologicals. We invest. It is my belief that the linguist philosopher George Lakoff has in recent decades discovered that theories are buildings metaphor, in which only the foundation on a shell of the building metaphorically is made. Scientific dichotomically opposing this separately by 500 years in the industrial age is Teresa Valler's interior castle, metaphorically representing the human soul as a castle resplendent within inner crystalline rooms, as Jesus in age so long ago, and yet still possessed of many relevance to us. Was at my father's house there are many mansions. I have developed my own metaphor for the human soul that are the 10-pointed spherical DECAGON, in which is gloved the 8-branched tree of spiritual knowledge. Each point in the spiritual decagon symbolizes the crossroads that of physical and spiritual sensory perception of touch dichotomically. The physical sense of personified sight, for instance, which is usually weighed down by concerning itself with the outer appearance of the person, is dichotomized spiritually by the self-same souls to concern for the well-being of the surrounding world. A brief overview of the conceptual framework of I would like to hear and sketch for the reader a brief overview of the concepts I have developing and the character of non-primitivity in general. As I see it, it can be divided into the biohistrionic, the componental, the organic, and the architectonic. First, take a look at the biohistrionic development of a tree. First, as a mere seed, it develops roots, then finally leaving behind forever its still attached fetal rooting. It erupts from the earth, sprouts branches, and lives what is a hopefully long and nurturing life. We can also see in all this its componental and less obvious extent its organic and architectonic characteristics. These four characteristics, in point of fact, are space limitation, epistemologies, not ontologies. They are, ever will be, or always were, a basic and fundamental part of selfhood of the American landscape, which is why we made America the land of invention. It is today, sometimes reckless invention. There is a built-in subject-predicate-verb relation that engineers into ongoing fruition and processing systematic ontology of each individual noun primitive, taken as a singular personhood, along with all-encompassing universal whole. Viewed as a sentence structure, this relationship is eternal to the structure of human language itself, which means that individual noun primitives will evolve as long as universal human language evolves. I wish there were more references for study in Joyce Lakoff's metaphors wielded by theories of building metaphor, which I feel easily linked to my own possible explanation involving those microscopes and telescopes, along with this link dichotomically to Teresa Revel's Interior Castle, both of which separated 500 years of rapidly advancing technology and industrialism, are also intricately interconnected by a series of sublimated dichotomies. This theories of buildings and metaphors serves much better than Lakoff's arguments as buildings. Metaphors as an outer shell or frame with which to encapsulate modern spirituality within. Read fast because I have to do it under 14 minutes. Both would fit. I am in no way claiming that spiritual persons don't argue, just that science and spirit make a much better dichotomy as opposite ends of a line of measure. The epistemology modality of the spherical decagon. I get less than 2 minutes. Setting aside for the moment the interior luminosity of the tree of spiritual growth that pulsates her experiential breath within the outer frame of the animated decagon, we can imagine as a universal metaphor for experiential gestalt, past tense, cause to effect modalities, and all lasting edifices concerning given a priori knowledge thereunto as being in unification all 10 points of the outer circumference of the decagon, each extending outward on a board of networking checkers, a web, a trampoline, and an inverted umbrella. And at the outer middle point of each a spiritual decagon, a microcosmic inhaling, with spirit sense perceptory enhances the crossroads between physical and spiritual perception. On this diet, and now I have to close down the report because I'm just about to run out of time, and I will be back very briefly, very quickly, and then shortly, and I got a ways to go. This is almost a whole book, so I wrote it years ago, and it's got a ways to go. So I counting down to 10 seconds. So here we go.